Record to that. Okay. All right. Good morning. I'm with my friend Joe Gray down in Colorado Springs. And Joe, good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Terry.
Thank you. It's been a while. I'm not sure I've seen you since last October probably.
Yeah, man, it's been a while.
It has been a while. It has been a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
too long.
So, too long. You're right. You're right. So it's been a pretty challenging year for pretty much everybody. So as a professional athlete, oh,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, Joe. Yeah, I lost you there. Yeah, as a professional athlete, what has the year been like for you, and dealing with challenges from COVID and those kind of things? Yeah, just give us kind of a brief overview of how things have been for you in terms of this year.
You know, there's a silver lining for it all, right? Uh, Being that we were all kind of trapped indoors. My daughter was born like right as COVID and the quarantine process started in the U.S. and so I was thankful for that time, just being around her 24/7 and around my son. And so um, COVID didn't really affect me that much mentally in that period of time because I was around this new baby and my kids, and usually at that time of the year I might be traveling a little bit, and so
Yeah,
being able to see everything with the kids and how they're constantly changing and getting able to see that, being able to be a part of that process was beautiful. The challenges though were the stores were empty for just about any and everything. So you had to get real creative with what you were going to eat.
yeah.
We did a lot more of creating our own breads and things like that because,
Oh, cool.
trying to buy bread was a little bit difficult. And, I'm a big carnivore kind of guy. I like to eat my meat, and, a lot of the meats are gone. So, I had to, had to rely on some vegan, vegetarian type dishes here and there,
Okay.
which, for me is not a problem. I like to eat kind of everything, but,
Yeah,
and then also the fact that there are a lot of precautions that you had to take into account, wearing your mask, making sure you had that even at times on some trails where you're on single track. And, initially I was like, why do I need to have a mask when I'm outside, when I'm not around anyone? But then when you think about it, when you're passing someone really closely on a single track, maybe you're asymptomatic, and maybe that person is more susceptible to dying even from something like COVID, and you could very much give it to them very easily. And
yeah,
so it became something where, you had to definitely be thinking more about others more so than yourself all the time when you're outdoors, which is very new. I think a lot of times when we're on the trails, we kind of tune out and we're not thinking about other people. We're just kind of just
yeah,
doing our thing, wave hello and just keep it moving. But now it's like you definitely, when you see some people, you're thinking about grabbing your mask and making sure you're not coughing or spitting near groups of people. So, yeah, a lot of things have changed, and then going forward, I think that's going to be the new normal.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, Joe, for thinking of other people. It's yeah, you're right. It's a really good point, and I think it is one of there's always silver linings. I think in situations if we look for them, and I think you're right. It's important to be responsible for think about other people in that sense, and so yeah, great. I'm not surprised you're doing that because you've always struck me as somebody who's thoughtful about other people too. Um,
Appreciate that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, how about competition for you? So, have you been able to? Obviously, you've been running. You can train, but have you had any competition this year at all? How's that been like?
So yes, this year, but before quarantine, and before like COVID really struck, America really hard, I was able to compete. But since that time, um, I've mostly just done a couple projects where I've done a couple FKTs just to kind of
Yeah,
that outlet to just compete with other guys that that I would usually be competing against head to head in a race.
right.
And so being that we didn't have that race to compete head to head, I just, went after some of the FKTs that I knew a lot of other guys that I compete with were going after. And so just kind of gave me something to look forward to, something to kind of challenge myself while we wait for races to return.
Yeah. So the World Mountain Running Championships were cancelled, weren't they? So that was yeah, I know you were really looking forward to that, and
Yeah.
that's always a big, a big event on your year, and so yeah, I'm sorry that didn't happen, but yeah, look forward to you competing on that next year.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was really kind of a while before the race. I started to feel like it was going to happen just because I knew it was on an island, and rightfully so. I mean, when you're, the government probably doesn't want a bunch of foreigners who maybe carrying COVID to come there and just infect this island.
Right.
And so, I understood the reason why they canceled it for the safety of the people who were living there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely heartbreaking because, I wanted to come out and defend the title and represent my country again. And now I'll just have to wait a little bit longer for that.
Okay. Okay. Well, I wish you success with that, Joe. Yeah. So turning to your situation as a Black American athlete in trail running, and you're still very much a kind of a lone ambassador, if you like, out there in the sport. And what do you think needs to change in the sport? And I know you've shared some ideas on this online and so on. But what do you think needs to change in the sport to get more Black American athletes involved in trail running?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a million different routes you can attack that issue. But for the sake of time, typically what I'll talk about is the main issue is the exposure and the coverage of athletes of color. When you look at the outdoor world and the trail running, mountain running media, sports media,
Yeah.
there's not very much color. There's not very much diversity, and so this hurts their ability, the ability of Black athletes like myself to inspire that next generation of Black kids to get into the don't see the media. And sports media influences brands, major brands. My brands, stuff that you like, stuff that a lot of people like. They are influenced by the media and exposure that they see in that media, and so therefore it leads. That's how they kind of come to the conclusion as to who they want to sign in terms of sponsorships and elite level, contracts and partnerships. And so when you don't have athletes of color or you don't have diversity at all within that sports media, it really hurts the ability of that sport to become diverse and the ability for that sport to inspire kids who don't look like everyone who's already in the media. And so, when we look at basketball, for example, basketball is very multicultural, very multicolorful,
Right.
because when you look at the media for basketball, you see white, you see Asian, you see Black, you see everything. There's the NBA has got it right. They know how to promote their sport, and they have a wide range of colors and people from all over the world who are fans of the sport because of the way that they promote it. In our media
Sure.
is making ground. They're making changes now, but all my career and
Yeah.
before I came around, it was very much a white sport, and that's how it feels.
Yeah.
And even still to this day, when I talk to Black athletes, especially some of the kids I grew up with, they're like, "Man, you're the only one out there doing this. That's weird." It seems weird to them because
Yeah.
you don't see that many Black people being exposed, getting exposure in our sport in the media.
Right, right. That's a really good point. I mean, we were talking about this at the conference last year, and how people were saying that it's like I look at the media and I don't see anybody who looks like me out there. It's like it's funny. I had years ago, I had a black friend back in England, and we went to the beach one day, and it was a gorgeous day on the south coast of England. Got to the beach, and just kind of walking through to find a space on the sand because it was pretty crowded. And my friend turned to me and he said, "Let's stop for a minute." And so I was like, "Okay, what's happening?" And he said, "Just look around you. Tell me what you see." So I looked around and I was like, "Wow, there's a whole bunch of people here. It's pretty crowded." And he said, "How many Black people do you see here?" And I was like, "Oh, it's just you." And yeah, and it was kind of a real eye-opening moment for me, because it's like until we kind of open our eyes to what's missing, then it's like we're not necessarily aware of it. And so so I think, you know, what you're saying about the media and that kind of thing is just you know, because we've kind of because the sport has kind of had these blinkers on, that it's time to, you know, take them off. And you're right that your progress is being made, but there's a lot of history to undo. Um, and
Yeah.
so we need to make some kind of, we need to lengthen our stride a bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
and kind of
Agreed.
pick up some pace with it. So I mean, one thing I was thinking was race directors, you know, specifically, that you know, typically if you look at, and race directors is one kind of media in a sense, that their websites, you know, if people are looking at the websites and they don't see athletes of color, then it's like, huh, okay, well maybe I'm not welcome at this race, if I am an athlete of color, you know, that kind of thing. So do you think that's an important part of kind of this equation, and something we can do to change?
Just, you mean in terms of like having people of color in on the websites of these races?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Is that what you were saying?
yeah,
Yeah, I think that can help. But I think ultimately the sport has to be promoted in the right communities. And you know, if you do want more Black athletes, there are avenues, that there are groups that are, you know, promoting, you know, Black athletes to get into the outdoors and stuff like that, and get into rock climbing, even, or mountain biking or hiking. You know, reaching out to these groups so that they can give it to their people in that group can help increase, you know, the numbers of diverse athletes coming into that sport, and to that event. And ultimately, a race director is willing to do that extra step. It's only going to be more beneficial for them. You know, like, let's just say they don't even care about diversity. I bet you they care about money. And so you want to make more money, you gotta you know, reach out to a wider range of people.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that kind of leads me to my next question, in terms of, you know, what can the white majority in the sport do to become better allies, for athletes of color, and help increase diversity. And I guess you've touched on one point there, that, you know, race directors, okay, you can reach out to communities of color, within your own community, within your own area. Is there anything else that we can be doing as a sport to be better allies to runners like yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately the biggest help that just the human idea, the idea of just being a human, and understanding that our country has a very ugly history when it comes to racism, and understanding that systemic racism is a real thing, and that it affects Black people when it comes to this sport specifically, and other sports where there's not that many Black people. Um, Understanding that, and being educated and knowledgeable about our past, our country, outside of just simply sports, but just understanding the history of racism and how that affected Black communities, and why that might lead to a lack of Black communities in certain sports or areas of life in general in the U.S. I think that helps a ton. A lot of times when you see people who have racist views or just ignorant views, a lot of it is just because of the lack of education. They're too lazy to take the time to understand the history, and they don't want to. They want to be blinded by it. They don't want to acknowledge it. And it's important to not be one of those people. Black, white, it doesn't matter what you are. Don't be ignorant. Understand history, especially when you're dealing with something like this, where we're dealing with this issue of the lack of diversity in our sport. You need to understand, you know, the history of racism and how that affects diversity.
Yeah,
So, you know, I think it's just important to be knowledgeable, but also make sure that you understand that when you're in an area where it's very homogenous, somebody who's looking from the outside in, that looks like a lack of inclusion to them. That looks like it's not for them. Understanding that you can be more inviting and more social to people, to let them know that they're welcome. They're, you know, make them feel comfortable. I can say specifically for, for myself, there's many times in my life where I felt uncomfortable, and it wasn't because someone said something to me or said something racist. It's just that the way they looked at me, or the fact that I
Right.
felt closed off from them, or they they didn't want me to be a part of that event. I've been at many races where people didn't talk to me much, and
Really.
especially in my early career, kind of when I was getting into distance running. So I know what that feels like. And it's not to say that they were racist, but it's just like they need to understand, moving forward, um, if there's someone who doesn't look like the majority there, understand they might feel unwelcome and not included in that situation. You as a human should do your best to make them feel welcome, because this, at the end of the day, that's what life is about. It's about relationships, and our sport is just an extension of that. And so making sure that you understand and appreciate that social experience, and make sure that everybody's part of it.
True, true, and we're all in this together. I mean, that's the other thing is,
Yeah.
it's like we're all sharing this planet, and the best way. I mean, you're right, absolutely right. The best way we can get along and move things forward together is if we work together and do it jointly. Coach V Hill, from Alamosa, he was mentioned in a book by Dina Castor called "Let Your Mind Run." I don't know if you've read that, but it's a great, fantastic read. But she mentions that he said to her once, be a student of the sport, and study the sport. And I think I don't know if he meant this, including this as well, but I think it's a really good point to bring home, that it's like, to study, to be knowledgeable about the racism in this country, and the history of it. I think can make a big difference for and appreciate and help people appreciate what has happened. And also, I just think the incredible, I'm so proud of what you've done, Joe. Because it's like you're you're an incredible ambassador, and an amazing athlete, but to do all of this at the same time as you're an athlete of color, a Black American as well, is just like, man, you've made huge inroads, and so thank you for all that you've done, and I really appreciate this chance to talk with you. We'll be sharing this conversation with our friends and colleagues at the Trail Running Conference in just over a week or so. So sorry we won't be there with you in person, but I'll look forward to seeing you again soon, Joe. And best of love to you and the family. And take care.
Yeah, thank you again, Terry, for having me. We always have real good conversations, man, and I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do for the sport as well. I think you're a great ambassador as well. And sorry to everyone that I won't be at the conference, and maybe I guess you guys won't either because of the new situation we have. But definitely looking forward to meeting some new faces again next year at the conference.
Okay, beautiful. All right, thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you, Terry.